folks, we have an election coming up, and it could create some uncertainty. And so we're going to want to spend some time talking about that. But a lot of time we have kind of overlooked these economic news that has been coming out as people have been focusing on the election. But we had a payroll report on Friday morning, and to say it was less than stellar is probably an understatement.
That really is. Yeah, we all knew that it was going to have some distortions because the report that came out, it was for the month of October. And in the month of October, we had the hurricanes to deal with. There was also a strike at Boeing, and Boeing is a very large employer. So we knew that there were going to be some distortions. It was just a question of how big those distortions were.
And let me ask you this question. We knew that this information was there. The economists that they survey knew that this information was there. So when they came out and said, there's going to be 100,000 and it comes out to be 12,000 only, that suggests that either they understated that, they didn't understand it, or maybe there is a slowing economy that we just aren't putting our finger on yet.
That's right. And I think it's actually the latter, that there is that slowing economy. It's slowing, not stopping. But there are signs within the report that the economy is doing okay, but we have seen the slowing. I think the most visible point was at the end of the report, it talked about back month revisions. And so that's just a fancy way of saying that, this is a first guess and these numbers are going to be revised. And so when we looked at the revisions for August and September, those were very large revisions downward for the number of jobs.
And you think about downward revisions, and we've seen this before, that's not uncommon, but when you talk about 150,000 on the unemployment number, that's a big number.
It really is. Now, keep in mind, 159 million Americans are working, right? So when we see 100,000...
Well, 159 million go to work. Come on, let's have some fun with that. Sorry, Danny.
True. That's a very good point. Yeah, you know me well. But when we see 12,000 or 100,000 as a percentage of the total labor force, that's fairly small, but it's meaningful because if the economy is contracting in terms of the number of jobs, that is the seed corn for future growth as far as how people spend their money. And I think that really what we're seeing in the labor market reports is that even though we go from, say, a pace of 194,000 per month, which is what it has been for the past 12 months, suddenly downshift to, let's say it's going to be closer to 150,000. That's a pretty meaningful deceleration.
And we talked about, the misery index for a number of months, folks, and that's really the unemployment rate plus inflation. And if it kind of, we look at it as like the Mendoza line, if we using the World Series baseball term here, it has stayed flat. So now it's 4.1% of unemployment, 2.9% of inflation, right? So you had 7. That's just right on top of the Mendoza line. So not shockingly that this is a coin flip election, at least what it appears through the polls.
That's right. A lot of times the economic indicators are pretty good predictors of what's going to happen because if the economy is not doing well, people blame the incumbent party. Now, whether that blame is justified or not is up for debate, but people do. It's just like in Florida, they did a study finding that when shark attacks increased, or if it was ever publicized, that for some reason people would blame the city officials, and so you'd actually see big turnover in the next elections.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so even though the mayor can't do anything about shark attacks.
Coincident indicators. So
yes.
let's switch gears because the other really big news, of course, is we're right dab smack in the middle of earnings season. We got some really big reports this week.
We did. This past week, a lot of the Magnificent Seven companies, the big 7 tech companies, they reported, and it was mixed results. We had with companies like Microsoft and Meta, they reported what on their own would be really good numbers in terms of just the dollar amount that they're making, but it was slightly less than expected, right? And so people are like, what's the payoff to this artificial intelligence where they're shoveling all this money in there? But then you have a company like Amazon reporting where their numbers were very good, but because they've already probably gone through some cost cutting and maybe they investors are interpreting things just a little bit differently, their stock does really well. So there was this big gap between how some of the Magnificent Seven were doing versus others.
And we think about, the reason why, you heard this saying before, folks, that the market doesn't like uncertainty. Well, the whole world is uncertain. I am sure that you all know that. But what is in front of us right now is a huge bit of uncertainty. So we really want to get through next week, right? So Tuesday night, and hopefully we learn something Tuesday or Wednesday. It's not a contested election because that will cause concern. That will be volatility will go up. People will be concerned about what's going to happen. What is their candidate doing? All of these things. So, guys, get ready, because if it is a contested election, the market is not going to love that, and we're going to see some volatility. But that's where we come in and say this is not only volatility, but it's opportunity.